I want to resume recording. And everyone should be here. Happy Wednesday. It is the first day of fall, my favorite season, favorite season. And I'm here with some of my favorite people. I'm kind of thinking of Earth, Wind, and Fire, September 21st, and this being the first day of fall. At any rate, today is September 22nd, 2021. My name is Dr. Bobby Banks, and I am one of many members of a brilliant team who are convening today to bring you some cayenne pepper, Tabasco sauce, habanero spice on some of the COVID information that hopefully you've been learning over the course of the pandemic. We have been facilitating, I'll speak more slowly, sorry. We've been facilitating virtual discussions for the last 5 or 6 months to really create a space where people can come and ask their questions. So the name of this entire series is called Drop-In Hours. So hopefully everyone is on the same flight, going to the same place with the same people. I do want to pass over the microphone to I want to make sure I'm going from the correct side, pass over the microphone to our Spanish translator, because we are all members of communities that have been historically marginalized or oppressed. Part of the work that we've done to expand drop-in hours is to also include our Latinx brothers and sisters. So I'm going to give an opportunity for our translator to come in and share a little bit more about what live translation in Spanish will look like. And then we'll jump into a little bit more about the concept behind drop-in hours and why you're here today.
Yes, hi, good evening. This is Angie Schiavone, and I, together with Felipe, will be providing interpreting services into Spanish. So please bear with me for just one moment while I explain in Spanish how to connect to interpreting services. Hola, bienvenidos a todos. Estamos ofreciendo servicios de interpretación durante esta noche. Como pueden ver en pantalla, ahí están las instrucciones para poder conectar a la interpretación. Básicamente, busquen el símbolo redondo de un mundo que aparece en su pantalla. Ahí lo pueden presionar y luego se van para español. Si están en un teléfono o en una tableta, esta opción está ubicada abajo a mano derecha, verá 3 puntitos, presione esos 3 puntitos, luego se va a ir a interpretación de idioma, luego español, y luego es importante poner done o finalizar para que se active la interpretación. Muchas gracias. Cualquier problema que tengan, por favor, nos dejan saber en el chat y que disfruten la sesión de hoy. Thank you, Dr. Bambi. I've gone ahead and made the announcement about interpretation.
Muchísimas gracias a ti. Thank you so much for being here today and helping to serve our Latinx brothers and sisters. So we're going to go back to the beginning. Drop-in hours is a concept that is part of a bigger effort called Not a Host that I'll tell you about in a moment, but we have 2 amazing experts here today. One, an infectious disease physician, and one, a pediatrician that's done a lot of work over the midst and over the trajectory of us being in the COVID-19 pandemic. So the theme for this month's session is immunity. Are we there yet? I'm sure you've heard these terms, immune response, immunity, herd immunity, and all of these terms. And I'm sure you're like the child in the back seat of a car, like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And so our experts today are going to share a little bit about their journeys over the course of the pandemic. And then we're here to answer, or they are here to answer your questions. I'm a facilitator. I'm like the 2-year-old that will ask a series of questions, but why, but why, but why? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about drop-in hours, and then we will allow our experts to tell us who they are, share some of the knowledge that they have from their respective fields and industries. And then we invite you to ask your questions. This space and place and time is for you. And so if you look at the bottom of your screen, there are probably a lot of different icons. Find the one that says chat. There's a question that's been on your heart, your mind, drop it in the chat. Drop it in the chat and let our experts know, and we'll hopefully have an opportunity to answer your questions. So why are we calling this drop-in hours? Great question. Over the course of the pandemic, my team and I thought that there could be a different way that we could really communicate with historically marginalized populations to help make some of the information around COVID-19, infectious disease, immunity, face mask, mortality, all of these just different terms that you might or might not have come across over the course of your days on this earth. And so we created this space, drop-in hours. It's very simple. We ask you to drop in the room. We ask our experts to drop in this space and share the next few moments with us. And then we ask them to drop their credentials. What we know, if you are on social media right now or anywhere, is that everyone has become an expert in medicine, immunology, virology, health disparities, racism, you name it. Everyone's an expert, but there are people who have actually trained in medicine, who have trained in virology, have trained in infectious disease. So let's get their credentials and know who they are. And then we ask them to drop knowledge. Just make it very plain for us. We get it. We really get that this is a larger issue, but how do we make really smart decisions for ourselves and our health so that we can get out of this pandemic? We don't want to be here forever. I know I don't. And then the last thing we ask them to do, if you are from the same generation that I am, thinking about coming to America or the talent show you were in as a child, when you're done sharing information or you're done with that performance or that opportunity, you drop the mic. And so if you remember coming to America with Randy Watson, when you're done, you drop and you walk off the stage. What does that really mean here? It means that we're asking our experts to leave you with one thing, maybe two, to take away as you leave the session. So that's drop-in hours. Drop in, drop your credentials, drop knowledge, and then we ask you to drop the mic. In that time, this space is for you. Ask the questions that you have. We don't want you to get off of this webinar and not have an opportunity to ask your questions. This is, if you registered, you're here on Zoom. We are also being live streamed on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So as we say on all of our promotion, bring your friends, bring your questions. We want to give a huge, huge thank you to Duke Health for an opportunity to share this work and to work with two of their experts to share drop-in hours with not only North Carolina, but the entire world. I think we have someone from Brazil joining us today, which is pretty awesome. And I'm not sure if they're in the English or the Spanish speaking room. At any rate, that's the whole premise of drop-in hours. My name is Dr. Bobby Banks. I am the CEO of Pillar Consulting, and I've convened brilliant, brilliant, brilliant minds to help bring this session to you today. But I am excited, and I'm going to stop talking because we have two amazing people here with us today who, if you go and research either one of them, not only the work that they do in a clinical setting, but the work that they have done in communities, making sure that people understand on a regular day what health looks like, but even in the midst of a global pandemic, how to make the best decisions for you and your health. So I will give them an opportunity to say who they are. We have Dr. Lance Okeke and Dr. Kanecia Zimmerman are our experts who are dropping in, but I would like to open the floor for them to drop their credentials. And this is where this is no holds bars. We don't need humility. Let the folks know you know your expertise in and you know the work that you do. So I don't know if you want to go in alphabetical order, ladies first, men first, whoever got off of work first.
Kanecia will always lose alphabetical, so I'll go first.
Okay.
So I'm Lance Okeke. I'm a assistant professor of medicine here at the Duke University School of Medicine. I've been here at Duke for almost 15 years. I'm an infectious disease specialist, and so I've been on the Division of Infectious Disease faculty since 2015. My main specialty during the day is actually in HIV infection, and HIV health services research, trying to see what we can do to kind of end the HIV epidemic once and for all, using health services and informatics to lead the way. So that's what I do for a living, and that's what I do. That's what I was doing primarily before COVID dropped from the sky back in February of last year. And of course, with that, there's a whole bunch of extra bandwidth that doesn't exist that we're using to try to do this work for the community while we try to keep our day jobs and keep that going too. I went to Xavier University of Louisiana, class of 2002, as a historically Black college and university. I'm proud, and for those of you that know New Orleans, it's probably it is the best institution on earth and produces more Black doctors than any other university in this country. It has done so for the last 25 years. And so I graduated from Xavier in 2002. I went to Stanford University School of Medicine in Palo Alto, California, where I graduated back in 2007. And since 2007, I've been training and been on faculty here at Duke University Medical Center. Started here as an intern back in 2007, graduated from internship in 2010, graduated from infectious disease fellowship in 2015, and I've been on faculty ever since. So that's me. That's me in a nutshell. I'm a proud Nigerian. I was born in Boston and raised in Marietta, Georgia, but I spent time in Nigeria, and I can never go through any introduction without reminding folks that I'm proud of where I'm from and is a big part of who I am. So thank you for the opportunity, Bobby.
I appreciate you. I just have one correction. I know Xavier is a fine institution, sir. I would also like to give a shout out to Florida Agricultural Mechanical University in Tallahassee, Florida, HBCU Pride. So excited to have you here, and thank you for sharing people a little bit about your training. Less formal question, what's your favorite season? Because we just jumped into fall and you can tell me nothing.
Oh no, fall is football, so that's easy.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, it is also the beginning of school, so that's that takes away from it. But I mean, just that kind of inflection, especially if you live here in North Carolina, when state fair season is when it starts cooling down, and it's it usually hits on the number like within a day or two before after the official end of summer. That weather starts cooling down and it's time for fall, and I love fall in North Carolina. So
okay, HBCU Pride. Alignment with seasons, I'm here for it. Not from Nigeria, but I love some jollof all day.
Jollof is a bomb, you know.
Priorities. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for taking time out of your day to talk to the folks. All right, or I should say for dropping your credentials. Thank you. All right, so we'll go to Dr. Canisia Zimmerman. Can you please drop your credentials for the folks, and then we'll jump into some of the questions we had from people.
Absolutely. I am Canisia Zimmerman. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics with tenure at Duke University. I went to UNC Chapel Hill undergrad as a native North Carolinian. I had to go to see the Tar Heels, but I have had undergraduate training there, master's level training there, and doctoral training there in epidemiology. I have done all my medical training at Duke University. I trained actually in internal medicine and pediatrics, so I learned how to take care of both adults and kids, and then I did specialty training in pediatric ICU care. I've been on faculty at Duke since 2015, same as Lance. We kind of grew up together in the system. And in my day job, I not only attend in the pediatric ICU at Duke, but also run a fairly large NIH and FDA-sponsored program that really looks to find out what are the best medications to give children for what condition and how much to give them. What is the dose that they should be getting? That was before COVID. Since COVID, I've spent my time looking at schools, looking at COVID-19 in schools, how it affects children, talking, here across the country about what we need to do to keep kids safe.
Someone told me that you were on the CNN.
Yes, in fact, I was. And our work has been, part of the CDC guidance, and we've really, there's been a lot of grace, but we've, this year has been a good year for trying to get information out there, taking care of the community, moving things forward for us.
I have to give a huge shout out to Stephanie Lopez. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her name, but what we were intentional about for this session, given we knew we were jumping into the school year, was focusing on our babies. I don't have children, but I'm an auntie of a whole lot of babies here and around the country. But having an opportunity for folks to ask about the babies and going back to school and what does safe entrance into school look like. And so Stephanie mobilized some great folks from Duke, and the synergy, I was just like, how did you do this? Of someone who has worked in infectious disease and trained in infectious disease with someone who works more on the pediatric spectrum. And so the timing and alignment of these two experts could not be better. And I want to give a shout out and kudos to Stephanie Lopez. So favorite season, Dr. Zimmerman, are you with us? Don't be the outlier. Don't be the outlier.
I have to go with spring. I have to say that. That's when AAU basketball starts. Everything is kind of ramping up with regard to that, and travel, getting out of school, all of those good things. I'm all about trying to figure out how we can start relaxing and enjoying time. So we got to go with the springtime.
Okay. Minus the allergies, I'll give it to you. I'm a spring baby, so I'll give it to you. Thank you both for sharing this time and this space with us again. Drop-in hours, we kind of tussled at the beginning, like how long will people want to sit in a room? And we thought 60 minutes, it goes over into like closer to 90 and we still have to kind of boot people out into the waiting room, but we are here. Please ask your questions. And I do want to kind of focus on, as you start to drop your knowledge, one thing that we always ask people who come to previous drop-in sessions are, if you didn't get your questions answered here, like send us the additional questions and we'll answer them in the subsequent session. But there are two things that piqued my interest. I'd love to hear your perspective on it in the past week. Headlines, gotta love the news, gotta love media, depends on the day. One, from an infectious disease perspective, we learned in the past week that the COVID-19 pandemic, the death toll or the fatality, has surpassed that of the Spanish flu in 1918. We also learned that over 200,000 cases, or I'm sorry, about 26% of new cases, or a little bit over 275, I think, were among our babies. What does that mean to you? And I don't share that as a fear tactic. I share that as a moment in time as we continue to have discussions with people about decision making. And I'm always looking forward as an evaluator, like what's coming down the pike. So what did that mean for you if you have seen those headlines as clinicians, and what kind of crossed your mind if you have seen those?
Yeah, Bobby, it's an interesting question. I think the headlines about kind of comparing mortality or deaths for this pandemic versus the last one, on its face, I'm not sure how much I take from it. I think the point is that this event is a big historical event, is an event of historical proportions. And I mean, who knows how accurately counts were captured in 1918. The point is that this is a big deal and will be in many ways a part of human history, remembered mostly for not fond reasons, and I mean and will be a stain on humanity, quite frankly, for until the end of time. And I think that this kind of headline reminds us of that this is biblical, this is historic, this is a big deal. It shut down the world for almost 2 full years. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind. And it also reminds us that, we have to work together as community, as a country, as a compatriots to get out of this so that we don't even continue to break more historical records over time. And the only way we can do it is together with all hands on deck. We've struggled with getting all hands on deck, and it's honestly, quite frankly, the reason why we're still going through this. But one way or the other, we have to get it right, and we have to get it right quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love what Lance said. Just the last thing about getting, working together. And I think that becomes so much more important when we're talking about our babies, because the reason that there are so many babies who are getting infected is because they have no way to be protected, right? The way that we know that we can best protect ourselves is through vaccination. Anyone under the age of 12 cannot currently be vaccinated. So we have to do everything imaginable that we can to try to protect them. They are the most vulnerable. That is why the number is so high, or the proportion of cases is so high. It's because there are 60+% of other people who are vaccinated. The only people who are left really is not the only people. The most vulnerable population certainly are those who are under the age of 12.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know, and this was like a run-on statement / question when I sent you some of the questions from people. But again, children are so brilliant and lovely, I tell you, but they're little spread germs. And so I'm just thinking back to how we taught children at a fundamental level, the cough catcher, to do this so that you're not spreading germs to people, to keep your hands clean. If they have a fever, they're running a temp, keep them at home. What should protections look like for our babies in the midst of this pandemic? Surely cough catcher is not, well, I don't know. You tell me from your perspective how our babies should be protected.
The same concepts apply, right? If you are sick, please stay home. Wash your hands. That probably is the number one. Wash your hands, and wear masks. Masks are going to be really, really, really important. But remember, my mask protects you. So instead of coughing in your arm, hopefully you're coughing in your mask and coughing in your mask at home, not around other people. But my mask protects you, and your mask protects me. So we want to do those things in particular to try to protect our babies. Those are the things we need to be telling them. You stay away from other people if you can. Those are the things we need to do.
Okay. Keep questions coming, folks. I got a list from last week, and feel free to drop them in the chat as well. Some of the discussions we've had in other sessions are around, you mentioned vaccines as a form of protection. I'm a data person. I'm always watching numbers and seeing what they look like. And our very first session was with Dr. Diane Rowley, who is the widow of Dr. Bill Jenkins, who was the whistleblower for the Tuskegee syphilis study. And she made a statement, and we've been very realistic, not only as your clinicians or physicians or data people or research scientists, that everyone may not get vaccinated. It is a personal decision, and this is not the space where we're like, we don't do that. We fully believe and have known that we come from a brilliant lineage of people, and we'll make the right decisions given the right information. But tell us more about what that looks like, because again, I'm a forward-thinking person. What are people juggling right now? One of the things that she talked about with Bill, because he's a data person, was like what he would look at, because he has passed, is the probability of harm. Probability of harm from COVID versus the probability of harm from the vaccine. Our babies don't have that second option. So what do risks and benefits look like for our babies or our parents of our babies? I'm very long-winded, Dr. Zimmerman, if you haven't gotten that. If you need me to reel it in, just start doing this around 20 seconds in, and I'll but please, if you can share.
Can I start, Bobby, with the adults?
Please start with the adults.
Yes, let me start with the adults, because I hear you when you say that this is not a platform to try to convince, but the data is data. The data doesn't lie. And if anything, at the very minimum, you can just say, I'm just presenting data as it is. I didn't make it, and I'm not trying to spin it. It's just what it is. The fact is that 1 in 500 Americans have already passed away from this virus. That's done. That's in the books. They're not coming back. There were people that were here when we started this, are no longer with us, from a disease that honestly, for the most part, is preventable in terms of your acquisition, and especially certainly in the last half of the pandemic. And so, I mean, we're talking about 1 in 500 people. That risk-benefit ratio is a risk of harm. And you can think of all the analogies of how to compare a 1 in 500 chance of death going into March of 2020 to now. And those odds are not great, and not anything that I would want to gamble with. I mean, for anything. And so that risk of harm is significant, and no vaccine out there. If there was a drug that came, and Canisia is a pharmacologist in the group. If there was a drug out there that killed 1 in 500 people, it would not get close to any humans at all. And that's where this kind of balance of, okay, gamble of getting the virus versus gamble of getting vaccinated, the math doesn't even close to add up. I mean, I'm not even going to get into like the 2.4 per million cases of myocarditis or the 1 in a million cases of like thyroiditis or whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. The fact is, this is a virus that has already causes damage, and you're not going to beat that number in terms of quantifying harm, because the risk of harm is immense. It's scary, and it's honestly one that you don't want no parts of.
Can you say more about that? And thank you I'm a data person. I try to be as objective and open as possible. 1 out of 500, that's pretty major. We also know from Dr. Sherelle Barber that the life expectancy of Black men has gone down because they have started to get wiped out. That's very major. And what you just touched upon was, I would love you to say more about it. You said there are 1-point-something million cases of this. I think a lot of people see survival, and they think survival means you walk out and you're fine. Can you tell us more about what you see? You just mentioned 1 million-something cases of myocarditis,
yes.
That right there, sir, thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what people are dealing with. They survived, but what are some things that people are still kind of dealing with? Or would you call it survival? I don't know.
And I'm glad you brought that up. And there was a question in the chat that segues into this. There's 1 in 500 in the US, not around the globe. It's actually in the United States where we live. In terms of survival, right? Never have we seen a respiratory virus that actually causes long-term side effects, like the way the SARS-CoV-2, the virus causes COVID-19 does, in that up to a third of all patients who actually have COVID or got COVID have symptoms 3 to 6 months after their initial illness, which means that you're not talking about, I'm just going to survive and just kind of move on with my life. It's a 1 in 3 chance that you're going to have some kind of long-term side effects. And so I remember patients, participants, clients coming in and talking to me and saying, well, I don't know what's in that vaccine. Like, I don't know what the long-term side effects are. And I tell them, like, hey, number one, yeah, in terms of the long-term side effects vaccine, we're not seeing that much. But in terms of the long-term side effects of COVID, we know about that. And we know that those odds of 1 in 3 chance you're going to have some long-term side effects of getting the virus. The math doesn't add up. The vaccine, maybe long-term side effects, not seeing much yet. The virus, we know that it has long-term side effects. And so that's why I always tell people that, people come into the room and oftentimes say, I'm not sure what's in that vaccine. I'm not sure what they put in that, and I'm not sure what's going to do to my body. And I could tell you what I don't know is why is it that a respiratory virus is causing all those side effects like no other virus has done before? And what I don't know is what that virus would do to you if you're unvaccinated once it gets there with your risk factor profile and all that. That's a straight gamble. I have no idea. I hope for the best, but who really knows? What I do know is actually the vaccines are safe and effective now through the Delta variant. And so let's kind of align in what is known versus what is really unknown is part of what we do as clinicians, really kind of saying, okay, let's get the facts straight on what we know and what we don't know. Because there is a lot that we don't know, but we do know that that the vaccines are safe and efficacious, and we don't know the long-term effects of COVID on you if you get it.
Thank you for sharing that, the known and unknown. For the adults, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I can tell you're a data person too. I watch numbers. Dr. Zimmerman, for the babies who don't have all of the things he just mentioned, they can't sit at the table and factor those in as part of their decisions. I don't know, this might be a hypothetical, like sister, tell me, like,
we're learning more, right? Like there's been more resources put to learning more about children and COVID. We are learning more about what happens to them. We know that they can have almost everything adults have. Who gets those long-term symptoms, who has something called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. The problem is we cannot predict who will have something bad to happen to them. So even though the great majority of children actually do okay, some may have like a sniffly nose, they may not feel well. But once you make it into the hospital, 1 out of 4 children are actually going into the ICU. So they come to see me. When you come to the ICU, there's a possibility that you may need a breathing tube. There's a possibility that you may need to go on, other forms of life support, that you may need medications to support your blood pressure. And all of these things I have seen with regard to children who have COVID or who have had COVID 4 to 8 weeks prior that they may not have even known. So those are the things that we get very, very concerned about. And the more children who get infected, the more opportunity there is for these, albeit fewer children, to have these, pretty severe, deadly effects. There is a possibility. And we don't want 1 child to die, right? There have been over 400 who have died to date. There have been, over 4,000, almost 5,000 who have had this very, very severe situation where they've had to require breathing tubes and they've had to require medications to keep their blood pressures up. So I can't predict which one, right? If it's your baby or my baby or that other baby. That's the problem here, because we're gambling with who met. Like if you get it, you're gambling.
That's heavy. No, I appreciate. I had not seen the data on pediatrics yet, so thank you for sharing those numbers. I saw a tweet, that's not where I get my information, but there was a physician who said her PICU, or the pediatric ICU, has been full. Like, wow.
That's where I work. So this is what I see, right? So, and hospitals across the country have ICUs that are filled to the brim. So if your child, has some other condition that needs an ICU, we're struggling with beds and trying to make room for your child who needs a surgery that's emergent. You probably saw the kid who had appendicitis and couldn't get in, because of the filled rooms.
Okay. I have a couple of people are popping in the Q&As now. I think everyone's like, okay. So I'm kind of like Law and Order, like ripped from the headlines. So we talked about the COVID pandemic surpassing the Spanish flu, but Dr. Okeke, you raised a very good point that data collection or surveillance 100 and some odd years ago might have looked very different, but still understanding the magnitude of those numbers. We talked about the babies representing 26% of the cases. That is partly because they cannot, or they are not approved to get some of the protections that the vaccine offers. The other headline, ripped from the headlines, was that Chris Rock got a breakthrough case of COVID. Can you explain, and I say this to my students all of the time, explain this to me like I'm a 6-year-old. Don't believe the hype with all of the don't know. Explain to me like I'm a 6-year-old. Don't overthink it. Why are people who are vaccinated, like a Chris Rock, how is it possible for them to get COVID later? Or they're calling these breakthrough cases. Can you explain this to folks like they're in 6th grade, or at least for me, or a 6-year-old, either one, 6 or 12?
Yeah, for sure. So in my mind, is like, what is the function of a vaccine? What is the goal of a vaccine? Is the goal of a vaccine to create a force field around you? So all that virus spreading around, it hits that force field that's 6 feet from your head and bounces back and don't hit you? Or is the goal of a vaccine that, yes, we know the virus is out there and there's lots of it out there, but if it gets into your system and you get and you get infected from it, you don't get that sick because your body has already been exposed to the virus, or at least parts of the virus, with the vaccine. Your body remembers how to fight it because it's been exposed in the past. That's the goal of the vaccine, is not to make a force field around you. It's not sterilizing immunity, as we call it, where the virus hits you, the antibody neutralizes it, you're done. You don't even know that you have it. The goal is that if you get it, you don't get that sick. And so in that regard, from those metrics, the vaccine is still, in many cases, even including with Delta variant, 85 to 95% effective in preventing severe illness from COVID-19. And that's the metric. Even if you look back at the very initial studies that was measured, it wasn't, oh, these people never got infected. It was that when they got infected, they didn't even get that sick. And so the question is, if Chris Rock ended up in the ICU intubated on COVID with the vaccination, which still happens every now and then, that would be a story. But him just having it and having the sniffles and a little cough at home, that's a non-story. The fact that he's not hospitalized because he's not a young dude is actually proof positive that the vaccines work and will protect him from all the bad things, and then ending up in Canisia as part of the world, basically in the ICU and all that. And so that's the goal of a vaccine. In that case, these vaccines are highly effective, and we thank God for them.
I am appreciating the analogies and pictures that you're drawing. When you said force fields, I was like, thank you. It is not a bubble put around you and it's like, particularly if we're humans, you're still mobile. If you are on the front line, you still have to work. If you're taking care of children and the children has a caregiver and the caregiver there's just so many ways that you are still, as you said, exposed. And so that's why breakthrough cases are possible. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Zimmerman, do you want to share anything else to the sixth grader or the 6-year-old?
Sure. I mean, I would just say that although they are not a force field, you are still less likely to be infected if you are vaccinated. You are less likely to spread it, and you will have it for a shorter period of time, or at least your viral load, the number of copies of COVID in your body are there for a shorter period of time, which means less likely for me to take it home to my little 11-year-old who is currently not vaccinated.
Okay. We have a question, and we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, but one of them is there any current data on the outcomes of children who have gotten COVID by race or ethnicity?
Yes, unfortunately, children who are African American and children who are Latino have been disproportionately represented among those who have the multi-system inflammatory syndrome that I talked about, where people need to be intubated, they need support for their heart, they need support for their blood pressure. They are also disproportionately represented among those who have died. Some of that is because we also have had many more of us who have been infected, right? So it's a bit of a numbers game. So more chances of more infection means more chances of a bad outcome. And unfortunately, that certainly has played out in the data.
Okay. There's another question here that says, my 39-year-old son was vaccinated and he's tested positive for COVID. You might have already spoken to this, Dr. Okeke. Will he have any long-term effects?
So, we're still trying to gather data on that, but I mean, the preliminary data shows that folks that have been vaccinated are much less likely to have long-term symptoms after they're infected. First of all, they're most likely to get severely ill, but also they're less likely to have the long-term side effects of COVID. Now, what that says into the future, a year and 2 years from now, I can't say for sure, but at least the preliminary data is starting to show that, yeah, this actually does cut down the rate of long COVID amongst persons who get COVID and while they're vaccinated.
Our experts 2 sessions ago called this a data-driven pandemic. Like, we're watching the data because, again, people are moving and variants are, there's just so much going on that we're watching the data. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and you said, speaking of data, I just want to give a shout out to UNC. I have a thing for UNC folks. I got my MPH drop-in credentials in epidemiology from UNC. It's a great public institution. Kanecia, I'm always in your camp. I'm married to a UNC grad, so I had to get a simple degree from there, but one nonetheless. So shout out to UNC. Although their football team, I don't know about them. So
that's funny. That is
defense.
funny. I was trained in epidemiology and biostatistics at Boston University, but I studied health behavior at Carolina. So that's my.
Oh, you too? Okay.
Yeah. I saw epi. Honestly, what we're seeing right now in this pandemic is why I made the transition from epidemiology and biostatistics to really engaging with community. I'm a creative. I'm always thinking of different ways to share things with people. And to me, just continuing to see numbers get more disparate or continuing to do this over time, I was like, I got to do something creative. So I started off with data. I'm still very closely connected, but that part of this campaign is in response to seeing more Black and brown people die, more Black and brown people hospitalized, more Black and brown people getting infected. And so that's where Not a Host and Drop-In Hours came from. Yeah. Shout out to data people. I still have a couple toes in the data. Yeah. Quick question. As you were talking, you talked about the vaccine and you were like, it's not like the antibodies just come in and like kick it out. Can you tell people the differences or similarities between vaccines and immunizations? Because I think some people are like, well, we eradicated this. Why isn't this eradicated? So can you make the distinction or tell us about the similarities between vaccines and immunizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think for functional purposes, I mean, they're the same term. I mean, you can get into the nuance of the semantics, but that it's not really relevant to anyone. I think the simplest answer is the vaccines and immunizations are the same. Now, technically speaking, the results, what you hope a vaccine would do is to immunize and to cause someone to be protected from a virus with their own immune system, immunization. But ultimately, the goal of all vaccines is for immunization. And I mean, the actual noun can be interchangeable in both situations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I just see Dr. Zimmerman nodding. Okay. So another question. I'm not going to stop saying rip from the headlines, but I am also on social media a lot and I'm just seeing what people are saying. And can you share more about, because people are watching variants as if they are data people, Dr. Okeke, which I appreciate.
Yeah, it's good.
It's okay.
Good, yeah.
I don't know if you can do the odds ratios and relative risk and all that, but I'm not hating.
Yeah.
So as the variants are continuing to pop up, and one of the things that we learned from previous sessions is that viruses have been here long before us, and they will be here long after we leave.
Mhm.
They are looking for a host. They're looking for somewhere that they can continue to multiply, and they mutate, or they variants. They've done this since the beginning of time. And if I'm wrong, you can please correct me. But I think as people are watching these variants, they're trying to figure out, well, are more people dying? Is this more infectious? So I think they're asking about transmissibility and mortality. As you're looking at like Delta and the Mu variant, or for those of you who aren't familiar, the scientists are naming the variants the Greek alphabet. We started off with just coronavirus or SARS V something in the beginning, and viruses mutate. So we're going through, I'm glad I'm not a lab scientist, SARS V2, blah, blah, blah. But that's, viruses are mutating, or we have variants. Can you tell us about the ones that are coming down the pike? Are they more fatal? Are they more infectious? Like, help folks understand. To me, I'm scared of all of them. I'm staying at home. So like, I don't need to know which one's more fatal and which one's more infectious, because I don't want them. But if you care to share what we know and what we don't know.
No, Bobby, those are really, really interesting questions. And so the two that are being watched by the World Health Organization and the CDC are Lambda and Mu. Let me take a couple of steps back, because I remember I was giving a talk last week to another group, and I was like, the whole goal of trying to get vaccinated and getting as many people immune from this virus as possible is that we don't want to see that Omega variant. It is possible, but it doesn't have to happen. We're on Mu now. And for people that know Greek more than I do, they know what letter in the alphabet that is. But the point is that only transmission events can actually propagate different versions. And I like to kind of exchange that word variant for versions or whatever for purposes. It can only transmission events can actually propagate the next and cause and develop the next version of the virus. If we shut down transmission and infecting each other, ain't gonna be no more versions coming up in the future. It just won't happen. So Omega will never happen. But if we keep on doing this thing, like, okay, he give it to her, give it to him, give it there. With every transmission event is a more likelihood that a new version of the virus, a new variant will come to pass. And so the two that are out there right now beyond Delta are Lambda and Mu. The good news is that Delta is so awful that it has completely crowded out Lambda and Mu from even taking hold in the United States. Wow. We started with Alpha, which is a UK variant, and that came and passed real quick. And then Beta never really caught, and Epsilon never really caught. There was a couple others in there that we never really heard of, although they're in South Africa and wherever, and never really caught hold. And then Delta just kind of blew everything out the water. And so the good news is that so far, less than 0.2% of all cases in the United States are Mu. And it probably is going to stay that way. That number is actually decreasing because Delta is just kind of is the gorilla in the room. It knocked everything else out. Lambda is here, but it just percolated on the margins. And in terms of whether or not they're more transmissible, too early to tell, because there just hasn't been that many cases for us to say one way or the other. And in terms of whether or not they have a higher mortality, too early to tell, because again, there haven't been that many cases of it. I will tell you this though, that we talk about mortality, and we do have things to be thankful for, and that one of the closest cousins of SARS-CoV-2 virus was MERS. MERS, SARS-CoV-2 virus of the COVID-19, in the end of the day, the mortality rate case fatality rate or mortality rate is somewhere between 0.51%, probably even less than that, depending on how you get the measures. MERS back in Saudi Arabia in 2010, somewhere around there, had a mortality rate of 37%.
Wow.
37%. So can you imagine? The good news for humanity was that virus wasn't very transmissible. So the mortality was high, the transmissibility was low. And thank God it was low, and it's pretty much burned itself out because of that. Because if it had the wings that SARS-CoV-2 did, that COVID-19 did, we'd be having a whole nother conversation right now. As bad as it is, I mean, we were this close for it to be so many million times worse. So I just want to say that in closing, that the way to not even look at that as a possibility is to shut down this pandemic as much as possible. And when people ask me, what keeps you up at night? That's what keeps me up at night, is the fact that we could have another variant that looks like MERS, and then, I mean, we're in a world of trouble, for real. So we need to shut this down as quickly as possible together.
Wow.
Yeah, just to add to that, when you're talking about transmissibility, if you think about Delta compared to some of the prior versions of SARS-CoV-2, and this is like chickenpox. So people may remember chickenpox parties, right? Like where people went, we breathed on everyone else got chickenpox. Like that's where Delta is right now. And so that's why, Lance and I are like, we got to shut this down immediately because we don't want something that's worse than chickenpox.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other experts tried to explain to us that like viruses are going to find the most efficient way possible to do what they got to do. And so as they keep going from person to person, and what Dr. Okeke was saying, for those of you who are from the good Southern Baptist Church, Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. Omega is the very last letter in the Greek alphabet. We're at Mu and Lambda. We're here. And what he's saying is continuing to let the virus find the most efficient way to keep changing itself so that it can continue to find hosts and infect people. It might kind of, transmissibility might be low, or it might be at 37% where MERS is. We don't know. And so for people to kind of ask a hypothetical, like, that would probably drive me up the wall, Dr. Okeke and Dr. Zimmerman. Well, is it worse? Is it worse? I would probably like, well, what are you waiting on? Do you want it to get worse? Like, but people genuinely don't know. I get it. We have a question here in the chat from Gary Jones. Hey, Gary, good to see you. In reference to the booster shot, can you tell us more about it? And will it be a continued version of the vaccine? Well, can you tell us what a booster shot is? Because I think folks are like, "Ooh, it just popped up."
Yeah. This is an area of controversy. I see Canisia smiling because she knows all the deliberations back and forth, and it's hard to kind of interpret. But I'll say this. So first of all, booster versus a third dose. Back in like late August, they gave the approval. The CDC gave the approval for third shot for people who had conditions where their immune system was compromised. So poor immune systems, because we knew from the data that just the 2 shots alone pretty much only caused protection, like enough immunity in 40% of people with immunocompromised immune systems, 40%. So it barely even really worked. So our third shot drove that number from 40% to the high 60s, basically. So that's why it's really not like, oh, you ever had immunity. It's just like, get the third shot so see if you can kind of like increase the immunity that you have to an acceptable level that maybe can protect you. A booster is saying you had immunity, but over time it wanes, it comes down. And to boost that back up to where it was, we're giving you another shot, basically. And so we're seeing in all the data that, and lots of data out there that in the 6 to 8 month time frame, the protective immunity that you had after your second shot starts to kind of come down to the levels of antibodies circulating in your system, the level of T-cell response. It all starts to kind of come down a little bit. So to boost it, you get that third shot around 8 months after your last dose. And that's what they're deliberating about now. You may have seen the headlines, obviously, that for people over the age of 65 and immunocompromised, a booster is recommended, at least by the FDA advisory panel. The key, however, is this, that there's no definitive and really, there's no definitive evidence that for people not in those age groups, and I'm glad they came to that decision, that for people not in those age groups, even though we know that immunity is kind of waning and coming down, there's no evidence whatsoever that the groups of people under the age of 65 have more severe disease and more hospitalizations as a result of being that far out from their last vaccine. And so I'm glad that the advisory panel came down where it did. I mean, people were asking me before the conversations, so what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I had to kind of play coy because I didn't want to kind of get out in front of like the advisory panel. But my personal opinion, I'm free to share now, is, I'm not personally in support of giving boosters to everyone, because there are a lot of people that still don't even have their first shot. And if we're hogging everything, both here in the United States and for people in the global South and Africa and other parts of the developing world, don't even have access to vaccine. And we're talking about getting 3 when there's no evidence that it even protects us. I mean, I just kind of have issues with that. And so I think where it lies right now, about 65 and older, I mean, they're still waiting for the other advisory panel to kind of weigh in for official announcements by the CDC, but that's probably where it's going to be for the foreseeable future, is like, if you're older, 65 and older, you might want to get a booster. If you're immunocompromised, you definitely want to get your third shot and a booster when it comes by. In terms of the future of whether or not there's going to be like annual vaccines, so like, okay, is it going to be COVID shots every year to boost you and kind of to recombine? That's yet to be seen. It looks like it's going to be that way, but we don't know for sure. But it really, really sure does look like it based on what we know about where the immunity is, like 8 to 9 months after your last shot. So we'll see how it goes. But yes, I mean, prepare for potentially a COVID and flu vaccine every year for the foreseeable future.
My best friend is a physician. She said very early on, she said, this is gonna, well, we all know it's here to stay. And she said, you may be, if you choose to get the vaccine, getting it annually, if not more. Dr. Okeke, take us back to freshman biology. You just dropped helper T cells and antibodies like it was like, oh, bazooka bubblegum. So, and I'm thinking back to my HIV days. So a virus or something foreign hits your body, and then there are cells in your body, helper T cells, that jump in and start fighting. I'm going back to a 6-year-old. Is that right?
Yeah. So basically, there's multiple wings of the immune system, but the two that are relevant, that I'll at least talk about, are relevant here, are your B cells and your T cells. So the B cells are the ones that create the antibodies, and antibodies, and we'll probably get into a little bit of this more later, are kind of these Y-shaped proteins. They're shaped with like a Y. And their whole job is to find a disease, a virus, or a bacteria that they recognize and bind to it before it hits the cells, before the virus can hit the cell. So it kind of like is like almost like your bouncer, your bodyguard of the immune system. Like bind it, grab it, take it away. So the B cells create the antibodies. The T cells are the real assassins of the immune system. Because sometimes, even with the best antibody responses, the virus kind of hits its target and gets into cells and infects cells. The T cell, especially the cytotoxic T cells, are the ones that actually find the infected cells and chase down that virus where it is and kills the cells that are infected to get rid of the virus, basically. So the T cells get rid of it, viruses expose, antibodies take the rest that's circulating, but the T cells are the ones that do the work of actually finding where the infection is and killing it wherever it's trying to hide, basically. Helper T cells are complex. They do lots of different things. The helper T cells also give signals to the B cells to make more antibodies too. But the cytotoxic T cells are the ones that go to kind of kill the virus where it's hiding. And so that's why I made both of them, B cells and T cells.
It's such a biology nerd moment. I'm like, I remember that. And so really quickly, and then we'll go to you, Dr. Zimmerman. So when people are hearing about COVID tests, there are different types of COVID tests, and they said one test for can you tell us about what the COVID tests are looking for?
So COVID tests in terms of like, well, there's a couple ways we can answer that question. If you get a COVID antibody at Publix or Harris Teeter, that's a waste of your $25. First of all, yes. So there's a whole lot of misinformation about, if you get your blood and you get the COVID antibody in your system and they detect the COVID antibody in your blood that you're protected, that's not true. Not true. And the why of it is that those tests don't really test for the antibody that you actually need to fight the part of the virus that needs to be bound by those antibodies. So you can get any old random antibody to COVID, but who's to say that antibody that you're testing is actually the one that can actually fight off the virus? So you're measuring and be like, oh yeah, I'm good. You're not really good because we don't know how much of the real effective antibodies you actually have. In terms of the tests, rapid tests, there's tests looking for really the viral particles, the antigens that are in your system. And some of them actually have different platforms, whether it be PCR, rapid antigen identification. The details don't really matter all that much. But basically, the point is that it looks for viral genetic material or the part of the viral particle, part of the protein of the virus to say, okay, I see this here. That's how I know COVID is there. And that's what it is. So antigen versus PCR, that's
Dr. Zimmerman's like, yes, 4 times a day I talk about this. Really quickly, drawing back from, and feel free to still drop questions in the chat. I'm watching them, pulling back from some of the biology and immunology and all of that. What should people be thinking about with the winter coming down the pike? So we talked about the cooler temperatures and all of that. What should people really be thinking about life-wise with the winter months coming up in terms of protections or things they should be thinking about?
Sure. So the reason Lance and I get really concerned when winter comes around is because people crowd in the same place, right? We know that people, want to stay inside. They don't want to be outside. If you are inside, closer to people, there is a higher likelihood that things like COVID, other viruses as well, right? And this is when kids get sick in the winter. Other viruses can also happen during this period of time. We know that COVID in particular is less transmissible outside. So the one thing I ask my child when he gets home from school, did you eat lunch? Where did you eat lunch? If he tells me outside, I'm happy because I know that he took off his mask and so did his friend. So if I am going to have a period where people are taking off masks, I definitely want to be outside. Therefore, during the colder months, when people are inside, we all have to be masked up, right? Like we all have to protect each other when we're inside there. If people have symptoms, get tested. We want to know so that we're not actually spreading stuff to our family members, to our babies, to our grandparents. We want to know what's happening with us, particularly as viruses are spreading. And kids are going to have sniffles. There are other viruses, plenty of other viruses that are actually currently circulating. We see them in the ICU right now as well. So get them tested and make sure that it's not COVID. And even when, continue to wash your hands, continue to be very vigilant about those types of things, keeping things clean, keeping people clean, keeping hands clean, wearing masks.
I said, I joked on another webinar that I did. I said, we did a whole lot of funky breathing around each other before this pandemic. Everybody just, hey, hi, and now just really thinking about how to protect yourself and how to protect others. Okay. So indoors, more interactions. You just talked about one way to just try to make a switch. You ask your baby if he ate lunch outdoors, took his mask off. The other people took their mask off. They were outdoors, as opposed to being in a lunchroom or wherever, kind of huddled up, mask on, mask off, thinking about that. What about you, Dr. Okeke?
No, I completely agree with Kanecia on this. I say one thing about the mask. I don't know about the women in the crowd, but for the men, I'm so glad about that mask within public restrooms. I tell you that much. So
say more.
I'll be double masking going in there now. so anyway, a little off topic, but
that's funny. I thought you were going to say shaving or beard.
Don't know about the woman, but anyway, the winter, like Dr. Zimmerman was saying, is about, people congregating, and, it's really interesting because I hope that part of the good that's come out of all this is to get people kind of outside, because honestly, I don't really, my concern for risk, with the exception of like really crowded congregations outside, when you're going out and working out, doing anything outside, you're pretty much good. I mean, they were talking about orders of 20, 25 to 1 of you getting COVID from an outdoor transmission as it compared to indoors. And so it is an open question, though. It really is. And one that is really fascinating to me, like with the fact that the Delta peak hopefully has come and passed already, and that is actually starting to come on down. And so that by like the early part of November, we should be seeing like significant decreases in Delta, where we might be hitting July levels of virus. When you superimpose the winter, so saying, okay, now we're going to like cooler weather, people staying in more, but Delta variant coming down. What is that interaction between those two trends going to look like? Delta coming down, but people getting closer to each other. And I think that's a an open question that we're all on the lookout for. My hope is, and I've gotten out of the prediction game a long time ago in this pandemic, is that the Delta variant, and as widespread as it is, protects us enough with recent immunity where we'll have less suitable hosts for whatever percolating viruses, COVID-19 viruses, or even variants perhaps, to cause too much damage. But I have no idea. We'll see together.
Okay. All right. All these hypotheticals, or it's not even hypotheticals, there are a lot of different things that are being juggled or will be juggled over the next season. Wow. Can you say more about, I just got an email about flu shots. I saw eyebrows and okay. Flu shots on top of the COVID vaccine, or what should people be thinking about there?
Yeah, so I'm a little aggressive with that. Like, I've given many of my patients a COVID and a flu shot the same day. The recommendation was for 14 days between the two. The immunologic evidence to support not getting them on the same day is not that convincing at all. And honestly, I don't see mechanistically why it would matter to get them on the same day. But if you decide to wait 2 weeks between the two, that's totally okay too, as long as you get your flu shot. So the point is, get your flu shot, get it as soon as possible. And I mean, flu is still real. I mean, people think about flu as, and flu has been in the back burner because of COVID has kind of dominated everything. But the flu still kills 24 to 60,000 people per year. And so that's not nothing. And a lot of people are, most of the people aren't vaccinated, but a lot of them are vaccinated still. And so we need to be worried about flu and continue to do everything we can to kind of protect ourselves from that as well. But I will tell you that the flu season last year was essentially nil. It was nothing because everybody was protected and everyone was hunkered down with COVID and all that. Flu is coming back this year. It's going to rebound. It's going to get you. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Protect yourself. Get vaccinated.
Okay.
I will say we saw very few other viruses as well, not only flu, but like the things that we usually see in the winter that are bad for little babies, like RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. We see lots of kids under the age of 2 who get that and who have to come into the ICU. We didn't see hardly any of that last year because people were masking. We saw some this summer because people stopped masking and they started kind of doing everything they wanted. And that's what viruses do, right? They find their next period of coming through. But doing this, masking myself, masking you, has actually been helpful and will continue to be helpful if we can continue to keep it up and be successful along with vaccinations. Vaccinations first, but then masking as a second layer.
What are your thoughts for people who are just like, well, I don't know if I need to wear a mask, or someone said I didn't have to, or both of you guys came off mute?
So I will, I'll just start there. So in thinking about babies, so we talked about how they are vulnerable right now. This is why universal masking is very, very important. My mask protects you, just reiterate that, and your mask protects me. The thing about masking though is that it depends on someone else, right? Like I'm dependent on the school system, I'm dependent on Bobby over there to do the right thing. The thing about vaccination is that that protects me. And that if I give it to my baby, that protects my baby. So I have control over that instead of worrying about what someone else, if someone's going to breathe on my baby, or if we're going to go to the grocery store, if I can go eat, or any of those types of things, right? Like I'm dependent on everyone else. I want everybody to do the right thing, but we know they're not going to, just like you said, Bobby. But when I have control over vaccination, and that protects me.
Okay.
So let me build on that, Kanecia. Dr. Zimmerman makes a very, very important point about one question that we don't get asked in this, and I just kind of volunteer my answer at least, is so are you concerned about COVID for yourself now that you're vaccinated? I'm gonna ask that, people don't ask that question. I'll answer that question, even though you didn't ask it. For me, just me, not my kids, I'm not concerned about my personal risk of COVID. Yeah, is there a risk of hospitalization? Yeah. Is there a risk of death? Very, very, very little. The risk of hospitalization and severe disease, very low. Okay. And so for me, my personal risk, I mean, COVID is like just the flu, like you might get the flu, you might get a little sick, you're not going to go to the hospital, you're not going to die. Flu doesn't stop anybody from getting on a plane, traveling, all that good stuff. That's just for me. I'm worried about everybody else. and I'm worried about my kids. And so, I mean, if you want to get on that level of saying, okay, well, at least for my personal risk of it, if you're that insulated, then you can say, okay, get the vaccine and then keep it moving like that. Wear your mask to protect everybody else. But in terms of your own personal risk, it essentially becomes, I mean, I don't want to use the term just like the flu, but it's around that level, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not scared that COVID was going to be what takes me out going forward.
Mm-hmm. The way my clumsy is set up, like I literally came out of my kitchen too fast and I'm pretty sure I broke my third toe. And I messaged my friend, she said, just tape it up and go to the beach. And I'm just like, no, the way that my clumsy is set up, and I'm also a hugger. Actually at the height of when the pandemic was coming down the pike on March 8th of last year, I had a keynote and the first thing I did was hug someone that I knew. So I just know that my fears and my clumsiness combined keep me, I did make the choice to get vaccinated, and I also mask or double mask or triple mask, depending on who I'm around at the time. Mm-hmm. But thank you for sharing that, because I know that there's a lot of discussion around, well, I'm vaccinated, but I don't have to wear a mask, or I'm unvaccinated and I do, or I don't have to. And it's just like, look, you just made a very good illustrations. Vaccines for me, mask is for you. Our babies are still not protected. It's not really about us in many ways. This is about public health, so we can all get out of this pandemic and go outside and play and maybe do some live concerts. I don't know. But thank you for making that clear when it comes to masks. We have a question in the chat that I want to get to. Gary Jones said that he has some of his listeners who want to know if the virus is actually in the vaccine, because we do know there are vaccines that have active virus. And there are vaccines that do not. And from what I understand, there's a very small protein for the COVID-19 vaccine. But can you explain to the listeners what's in the vaccine? Is it the live virus?
Kanecia, you want to take it?
I think she's watching all of the chats like I am too. What?
I'm furiously writing back to the person who's writing in the Q&A, but I can answer that.
I know, please, I'm trying to, but please go ahead. Oh, we have someone who has their 12 and 13-year-old. Oh, Rattler Pride. Okay, sorry, ADD. Carry on. Sorry, the vaccine, is the virus in the vaccine that people are?
I can take it. I can take it for sure.
So the answer, in the chat. Sorry, Lance.
Yeah, no. The answer is no. So basically, it's a piece of, for the mRNA vaccines, mRNA is genetic material, right? It's not the virus, it's not the whole virus. It's just essentially part of the virus, part of the genetic material of the virus that gives instructions, and not even the instructions for making the whole viral protein or the whole virus. This instructions is making a big enough piece of the virus for your body to recognize the entire virus. So basically, it's kind of like saying, okay, the virus is a human. You're telling your cells, if you see this dude, if you see this face, if you see this whole person, call somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of taking the whole picture, you're saying, I'm gonna take his thumbprint. I'm gonna take his thumbprint. And then if you see that, somehow our immune system is smart enough to say, okay, thumbprint, that dude, call somebody, basically. And so you're getting the instructions for this genetic material into the vaccine. Is really just a kind of a lipid particle with the genetic material in there. Your body sees it, sees the instructions, makes the protein. Once it starts making a protein on its own, then your own immune system says, okay, what's this new protein that your cells are making? Let me recognize that. Let me memorize that. So the next time I see anything that comes into my body with this protein, I'm gonna know to attack it. And so that's what it is. This part of it. It is not the live virus whatsoever. And there are live virus vaccines. This is not a live virus vaccine.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a question here from a parent who has her preteens here, and she wants to know, what kinds of school practices have you seen that are most effective to prevent the spread of viruses? Should middle schoolers ask to eat outside? What should teachers be allowing students to do in the classroom? And what about student athletes?
Yes.
That's a great question.
It's a great question. So universal masking. So everyone needs to be masking in your school building, period, point blank, the end, no questions asked. Everyone needs to be masking right now. That's the first thing. And people need, just because you have a masking policy does not mean everyone is masking, right? Like we need to make sure in very kind ways that everyone has nose, mouth, and chin. If it's hanging down on your chin, it doesn't work. So we need that to be established first. Outdoor eating, absolutely 100%. So I have a 14-year-old who is in 9th grade. She eats outside every single day. I tell them both, put on a coat if it's cold, take off your clothes if it's hot. We need to go outside. Anytime masks are off, which they shouldn't be coming off, but anytime masks are off, I really want you to be outside. If it's raining, please be spaced out very far, right? Like this needs to be 6 feet or more if you're gonna have to be indoors. So using gym spaces, using even cafeterias, avoiding other people, getting creative about this. This is something like I advocate for at my schools, in our school district. This is really, really important. As far as student athletes are at higher risk. We have seen that in the winter and in the spring, the data that we collected, 50% of the infections that we saw spread in schools were associated with athletics, whether or not it was because you were on the court and, wrestling, whatever, like, or you were just hanging out, because athletes do that. It's right, exactly. It's not really clear, but we do know it's harder to mask in those situations. People take breaks. Like my daughter is an athlete. She does travel basketball. This was one of my major fears when we were talking about COVID, because she needed to play basketball for her mental health, her physical health, and everything else. But how do we do that safely? I got her vaccinated as soon as I possibly could. And that is the number one answer for athletes. Yes, they should be masking, but vaccination is what's going to be protective for those athletes in particular.
Thank you for sharing that. Oh, to be a parent. To be a parent and your mom is leading the school policy in the midst of a global pandemic, I would feel so safe. Mom, what do you like? That's awesome.
Well, she actually was also in one of the vaccine trials, because we were like that desperate to make sure that we could get some information that after we saw that it was safe, after I got my shot, it was like, all right, you can go in and we can see what's happening, because maybe you'll get the vaccine early and then I'll feel better about you playing basketball.
Wow. I have another colleague. She does maternal and child health, or she's an epidemiologist by training in maternal and child health. She has been waiting and watching the data and begging people, like, please wear your mask because my babies are not protected. Dr. Teresa Chappell's on Twitter all the time, but she's also watching the data. We have an anonymous question. The time always flies. We are at the end. A few more questions. Oh my gosh. Okay. So how does a ventilation system help to reduce spread in school spaces? Should schools, okay, lots of questions. Tell us about ventilation in schools and how it may or may not reduce spread. Should schools take temperatures of every student? And well, start there and then I'll give you the next question. We'll be here till 9 o'clock. Go ahead.
So ventilation systems, can they be helpful? Can they be additive? Sure. But if I'm spending my money on something, it's not that. It's going to be making sure that everyone is wearing their mask, and that if that's like people monitoring, seeing how things are going, that's what I'm going to spend my money on. If I'm spending my money on something else, it's going to be picnic tables or other places so that people can actually eat outside. So those are the things that I'm, really, really focused on. Yeah, if you have extra money to deal with, by all means. Mm-hmm. But there has been evidence even that came as recently as like a couple of weeks ago out of California. They had the most Mac Daddy, that's showing my age, like ventilation systems.
I know what you mean too.
Oh my gosh. Ventilation systems. They had HEPA filters in the room. They had windows open, doors open, people 6 feet apart. The teacher comes in, she takes off her mask, she's unvaccinated and she has symptoms and she reads to those little babies. You know how many other people got infected?
I saw that.
Yes, over 20 people were infected, including people in that classroom. Mm-hmm. Their parents and their siblings, and people in other grades. Mm-hmm. So without those fundamental things of masking and making sure people are doing that appropriately, that ventilation system ain't gonna save you. That's just, you got to get the fundamentals first. Mm-hmm.
Going back to data and science, going back to like the clear things that we know work. Yep. And to me, it just keeps going back to cough catcher. Like we've always taught our babies to like If we
Now
can
we
get the
have one
adults
that
to have
comes
the
across
same
our plate.
logic, yeah, and to cover up. The next question from the same individual says, how can one tell the difference between flu and COVID-19 symptoms?
Yeah, unfortunately, they are very similar. That's why getting tested is really, really important if you have any symptoms. You cannot tell just on face value whether or not someone has COVID versus flu.
But the effects, as Dr. Okeke has said earlier, completely different. The data has shown the long-term effects of COVID-19 cannot touch the flu with a 10-foot pole. Okay, okay, okay. Another question says, should students stay home for flu symptoms as well?
Absolutely, they absolutely should. And the current guidance suggests that they should go get tested to figure out whether or not it's flu or COVID, but we want people who are sick, period, to be out of schools.
Okay. We all have that one coworker, or I don't know if we all have them, but they're and they're doing all this, and it's like, oh, you didn't feel well? Why are you here?
Yeah. we have them here too. I mean, they can affect diseases, just FYI.
we all have that. We're almost at 7:20. I do want to give an opportunity for both of you. The way that this goes is that you drop in what you have, and we're so grateful that you drop your credentials, that you drop the knowledge as you have. And then we want to give you an opportunity as we wrap up to, if you have any final words as you drop the mic. I'm aging myself too, Dr. Zimmerman. Don't people still do that? I don't know. I do it with karaoke at any rate. If there's one thing that you want people to take away from this discussion we had today, is particularly as we're going into the winter months, and you've stated several times just some of the things we need to be thinking about, but do want to give you the floor to share any final words of wisdom and drop the mic with folks. And then if we have a minute or two left, we'll field another question. We're always happy to serve for those saying thank you. And of course, thank you to our experts. You're amazing.
I will just reiterate something that I've said, I think, a number of times here, but it is the most important point. Masking is very important, but masking, my mask protects you and your mask protects me. If I want to protect my babies, I'm getting vaccinated. If I want to protect my babies, I'm getting them vaccinated as soon as I can. Mm-hmm. That is the way that I can have control over what's happening. Otherwise, I'm relying on other people to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you one follow-up question? I'm sorry, I'm a qualitative researcher. Can you tell us about your decision-making for your babies? Because they don't have that autonomy or freedom to do some of the same things you got. If you care to share, if not completely, that is, I hate to put you on the spot, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, Lance talked about this earlier, looking at the risks and benefits of, risk of COVID versus risk of vaccination. What we know is that vaccination is extremely safe. Mm-hmm. What we know is that the risk of COVID, I don't really know what's going to happen. If my baby gets COVID, she might actually end up with MIS-C. She might actually be one of those kids who dies. And I'm not interested in rolling that dice. So for me, it's a really easy decision, something that I know is safe and effective versus, I don't really know. I don't know what's happening there. So as soon as it's like my kid is eligible, my 11-year-old is eligible, we are running to get that and the flu shot as well. Because I want him to be able to enjoy his life, and I want to be able to calm down as a parent and not have to worry about this every single time and not have to depend on you, Bobby, to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. I hate that I have to be the example, but I hear you. I hear hypothetically, but trust and believe I stay master. But I get it. I totally understand. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Okeke, any drop the mic wisdom you want folks to walk away with?
Yeah, Bobby, So I want to thank you for this opportunity, first of all, to kind of just talk to the community. We can't do this enough because this is every session. I want to thank Canisia, my friend, Dr. Zimmerman, for coming out and spreading her knowledge as well to the community. We're still here, and that's a good thing. Every day above ground is a good one. But I want to leave with two thoughts. The first one is I love how you set up your entire forum on dropping your credentials. I think in the context of this conversation, dropping your credentials is prime. And here's the reason why, because we're going to go off here in like 10 minutes or less, and Facebook is going to be there 24/7 in perpetuity. And the one question I want folks to ask and taken away from this is, when you read those sources of misinformation, those sources of, frankly, lies on Facebook, at least ask yourself one question. Has the source of that information dropped their credentials? And if they haven't, what can I do to find those credentials by myself? And it's something as simple as a Google search. Google my name, Google Kanicia's name, Google Dr. Banks's name. You'll see our credentials. Google the name of the person on your Facebook that's giving you that information and see what you find. You'll be shocked sometimes of the results of your search, but it's that simple. The second thing is, and this is always a hard part to get through, 677,000 people have died in the US from this. 85% vaccines effective and yada, yada, yada. And those numbers sound abstract, sound like just numbers on the news to many of the people in the lay public, to many of the people in your audience. To myself, to Kanecia, I know this is personal. We are tired. We're tired. We've been doing this for 19 months, seeing this time and time again. And here's the reason why we're tired. We're tired because preventable death, and this is the beginning of my 20th year in medicine. I started medical school in August of 2002, and we know from our experience as residents and as clinicians, I mean, especially my ICU doctor colleague here, that you never get used to death, to seeing death, no matter what its cause is, no matter who it is. But preventable death has a very distinct kind of sting to it. I've seen more preventable death in the last 18 months than I've cared to see my entire career. And so those numbers might be abstract to you, but to me, I remember every single one of those deaths. I carry them to bed with me at night, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it. And here, these numbers come down to the ones. The 677,000 come down to the ones. Each individual case of the 45-year-old nurse who left 5 kids, or the 39-year-old mother who left her newborn baby that she had 2 weeks prior as a result of this illness, preventable death. That, I'm a human first before I'm a doctor. That doesn't leave me. And the question I always ask in going into those rooms with my PPE up and seeing them there for that final time is, what would they do to have the opportunity to be sitting in and dropping in with Bobby Banks? What would they do to get vaccinated? What would they do to keep from the fate, the many years of life, of quality life they left on the table because of a decision not made? And so I want to leave you with this. For those 677,000 of our compatriots that we've lost in the last 19 months, do everything you can to protect yourself and the people that you love. Get vaccinated and mask up, and let's get through this together.
Thank you so much. We know that much of the work that you and so many other people, they can be thankless jobs. And I'm sure that people don't really, I shouldn't generalize to everyone, but hopefully you feel appreciated for the work that you do every day in the midst of, as you said, so much noise out here in the world, when you're just trying to get a clear message to people so they can make a clear, informed decision for their health. So thank you for waking up every morning and going to your job and fighting for the folks, and getting on webinars at 6 o'clock at night in the middle of the week when you could be at home with your babies, doing other things. This is also a part of the fight. So thank you both for coming to this room and for being transparent and honest about how serious this is. It is mind-blowing that we are where we are, and hopefully that we could put a tight end on this, as you said, so we don't ever have to see the Omega variant. There's no need for us to see the Omega variant. We have too much information out here, too much information for people to make an informed decision for their health. So thank you both for dropping in the room. I'm gonna wrap up. My throat is all kinds of dry now, Dr. Okeke. Dr. Zimmerman. My late mother was a nurse, and I think so often about what she would be doing if she was alive. She would be you guys. Like she would be the warriors out here helping to inform policy, helping the community to understand tirelessly, without a doubt. So I have a special place in my heart. doctors are cool. I love nurses. But in general, just clinicians that show up and fight the battles. And as you said, walk in with your PPE and then know you got to go home and have dinner with your family and then ask your babies if they ate outside or inside. So we love you. And I know that's not very professional to say on a webinar, but we love and appreciate you and the work that you do for the community. And thank you so much for wrapping up a season for us that has been rewarding in many ways and frustrating in many ways and exhausting in many ways, but we are committed as public health change agents to continue to innovate and continue to do what we can given the training we have to educate people. I'm going to show a slide of the folks behind the scene, and I don't know if they're okay with me showing, but I'm going to show a screenshot of the people who have made this happen. Not a host was my little brainchild driving around in the car last March. And I did not explain at the onset of this webinar, but Not a Host was a seminal and focal piece for this entire campaign so that people understood at the height of this pandemic, the virus, as we said earlier, viruses are looking for a host, warm body with a ticking heart. We want you to do everything in your power to keep that virus out of your body. We want you to make a choice and do everything within your power to not be a host. And so the things that we're sharing with you, the science and the data are the things that will help you to not get infected, to not share the infection or to infect other people. And the other thing, as Dr. Zimmerman alluded to, is having events with 500 folks. It may not be the time. So really thinking about the best ways to continue to protect yourself and your loved ones. I'm going to share my screen with, I call them my dream team, and I hope you're okay with me sharing who you are, but I want people to know the young and brilliant minds who have contributed to this work for the past 6 months. Sorry if you have your eyes closed or you're looking to the left. This was our third session with Dr. Viviana Martinez Bianchi and Bobby Burgess, but these are former students. These are current students. These are folks out in the community, Miss Lolita, and so many others who are dedicated and who really believe in this work. And they have had a difficult journey like so many other people. Family members are sick. All of the things that continue to happen in the world to so many people, including the folks on this webinar, has happened to this team, and they still show up. The only person you don't see here is Johnny Jones, who is our designer. So I want the folks to see the dedicated people who made this happen. And in the pursuit of continuing to serve, we will have an opportunity coming up on October 21st. We will be competing on a national stage to continue to bring Not a Host to Black and Brown communities. So we just found out a couple weeks ago that we will be, right, Dr. Zimmerman? These folks will be competing as part of the 2021 Empowered to Serve Business Accelerator. So we're bringing Not a Host to the folks, and we're going to continue doing this work until this pandemic ends. So thank you. Thank you to the team for everything that you have done. It is 7:28. I let you out 2 minutes early, but if folks have one more lingering question, I'm sure our experts will stick around for another 120 seconds. And a huge, huge, huge thank you to Duke Health for believing in the ways that we continue to advance health literacy for our folks. If you are as old as I am, you talked about aging yourself, but FUBU, for us, by us. This is very much a for us, by us effort. And we're going to continue doing this work, whether we have 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 penny, or 100 pennies. We're going to make this work happen. So thank you, Dr. Canisia Zimmerman. Thank you, Dr. You won't let me call you by your. Thank you, Canisia and Lance, for showing up and sharing with the folks. And I hope and pray that your work in this pandemic will be done very, very soon. You can go into the work that you're passionate about for the rest of your days.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my heart is so full. I'm going to stop recording. Oh.
Thank you, Barney.